Hello, and welcome to Deconstructing History, the podcast where we talk about all things living history and reenacting. I am your host, Mike Baker. On today's episode, I'm joined by actor, writer, and producers Barry Duffield and Ova Saopeng. In this episode, we will be discussing the Hollywood side of making historical films, how the decisions are made, and the role of the actor and producer in making television and films. Barry Duffield is a New Zealand-based actor, well known for his role as Lugo in 2 seasons of the Starz series Spartacus. As a writer, Barry had also crafted the story for Deadman's Land, a werewolf horror comic set during World War II. Barry has also had roles on shows such as Xena Warrior Princess, Broken Wood Mysteries, and Power Rangers. Ova Saopang is a Lao American actor who portrayed a pirate on the crew of Chow Yun-fat's Captain Saopeng, and then Keira Knightley's Elizabeth Swann in Pirates of the Caribbean 3. Ova can also be seen in the horror short Go to Sleep, a Lao Ghost Story, as well as the dramatic short Warsol. And so on with the show. Ova, did you want to tell us how you got into acting and sort of how you got the role for Pirates of the Caribbean?
Oh boy, that's going to be a long story, but we'll start off as best as brief as we can. So I actually am fortunate enough to have acting and performing call on me. The art call on me. I think that's kind of how I see it. I began in the 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade, and I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii, in a rough and tough neighborhood of Kali'i. And there at that middle school where I was at, a theater company came and performed from the high school, Barrington High School, and through that was how I got into theater. And it was just by chance. And I love teachers. Miss Watanabe, wherever you are, I love you. It's because of you that I'm where I'm at right now. She just saw the potential and talent in me, and she asked me to basically go to this audition after school. And I was a good student, so I said, yeah, sure, I'll go. And then from that point on, the company that I was with was called TeAda, and I had been doing theater and acting ever since. So since my teen years, and so the one thing that I would have to say about my journey is that I think having grown up in Hawaii gives me a different perspective on, I guess, my identity than continents, Asian Americans who grew up here on the continent, because I was surrounded by, just a different perspective. And you'll notice it just generally in terms of, if you look at a lot of the sustained working Asian American actors, I think they have connections to Hawaii, and I think part of it is because the whole struggle of identity here on the continent is different from Hawaii. Hawaii, we're all, because it is a very diverse and mixed state and predominantly Asian, Chinese, I grew up amongst Chinese, Japanese, Filipinos. And then Pacific Islanders, or Pacifica, as the new phrase is now, Pacifica, or people of Oceania, Samoans, Tongans, Native Hawaiians. And so because of that, being surrounded by that, I think my sense of confidence and my sense of identity was grounded and strong. And so I didn't question who I was or what I was until I came up here, because then the label became, I'm Asian American. And then being Asian American, I became Lao American. And even Lao American, then I'm like, oh, you're a different ethnicity than Lao. You're not Hmong, and what is Hmong? So just to say that I think my foundation in Hawaii was very, 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 very integral to who I am right now. And then from that journey, in high school, I continued doing theater, performing and writing. And what was the spark for me was just how empowering it was to be able to tell my own story. It was the first time that I ever got to, through T-shirt theater, be able to craft my own story. I wrote a poem about my family's escape from Laos, and the director then said, why don't you perform it? And it was just powerful for me to be able to take the words that I created and then stage it. And in staging it, I realized how the impact on audiences of they were listening to the story, but they were also impacted by it. And they there were moments where they laughed and they cried. And I was like, wow, this talent I have, this skill that I have to entertain as well as to educate is in me. And so so that's kind of how I started in acting. I then pursued a college degree. I went to the University of Southern California School of Dramatic Arts. I got a bachelor's of arts in theater. So I moved from Hawaii to California, came to LA thinking, oh, I'm going to hit the Hollywood and I'm going to, do all this, movie and acting and TV, and come to find out, ooh, it was not easy. It was not easy because opportunities at that time, it was in the 90s when I graduated, mid 90s. And so it was very challenging to even get roles because there weren't that many roles. And so I then found my way to work in theater here with the company that I currently am co-artistic director of, which is TeAda Productions, and we elevate stories of refugees and immigrants. That's my passion. Now, in terms of the entertainment industry, opportunities came and went, and that's how I got into film and TV. I've been doing this long enough that I have done work in independent films that are really, really low budget, and I'm just getting paid food. And I've also been on huge, big budget, $300 million films there where I got luxury being flown all the way to the Bahamas and seen, the Caribbean. And we're going to talk about that film, hopefully, and to see the spectrum of experiences in this crazy and wild field that is the film and TV industry.
And I know, Barry, that you've been in the business for quite a few years, actually. I think the first movie I saw that you did was No Escape with Ray Liotta in, I think, 94, 95. But you've been acting, writing, producing, and editing ever since. So if you just want to tell everyone what got you into acting.
It's on my bio, but as a kid, I was a kid that used to go into the movie theater and steal movie posters. I think I was 11 or 12 years old. And the guy that ran the theater said, hey, I'm going to give you three choices here. I'm either going to call the police, I'm going to call your parents, or you can work for what you're stealing. And he taught me how to run the projection booth, everything to do with exhibition side of film. And then the manager who ran him used to bring me books on frame by frame filmmaking. So they fostered my obvious love of the film industry, a love of film. And then I took a huge segue and joined the services and did 13 years military service. And then at the end of that, I just went, this is enough of doing something that I'm just doing to live with. I wanted to go do something I was really passionate about, and it was always film. So I took a late start and went to film school at the age of 34.
And yeah, speaking of pirates, so you had started as one of the Asian pirates, first under, was it Chow Yun-fat, and then Keira Knightley. And so, getting a role like that, what did, the producers, directors, writers, what were you provided with, first of all? And then, what did you have to do to, prepare to be, to portray a pirate? As we joked before the episode, you're not an 18th century, I'm not an 18th century pirate. There's none that are alive. So it's like, how do you portray, as one of my acting teachers call it, Chris Neville said, you're doing realistic behavior in imaginary circumstances. So what preparation did you have to do to kind of do this?
Wow, that's a deep question, Mike. So let me share with you just how I got on the project, because that's a fun story to tell. So I had been burnt out at that point in terms of the industry because I was doing a lot of background work, and I needed to have regular income, so I had to get a regular job. And so I'm getting a regular job, and I've been kind of deflated by just lack of opportunity. And then suddenly a casting director calls my phone up direct and says, hey, I want you to come out to the audition for this thing. I'm like, whoa, I hadn't had gone out in a while. So I'm like, wow, this must be special. I mean, maybe it'll be for a big role, and I'll be getting maybe, I don't know, 8 to maybe 20 other competitors. Come to find out, it was a huge, big background casting call. It was a cattle call. Over 800 people who came out, and this was at Disney Studios. So I go there, and I'm like, what is going on here? I was like, oh man, I'm just so, I don't. And so they had all these people, And so then so then they started to call out, and they had PAs going out and saying, "Hey, we need anybody who is dark skinned, brown folks, come over." So so I get over there, and then they kind of like they were looking for all basically dark skinned, brown, Asian, Filipinos, Southeast Asian. So like my group of pirates actually who are part of it are Cambodian, Filipino, Lao, Thai. So out of that 800, I mean, they were looking for various different roles to fill. It wasn't just that, but the audition was actually for cannibals, because in the series of Pirates of the Caribbean, I believe the Pirates 2, Deadman's Chest, there's a beginning. The beginning scenes are on Cannibal Island, and so I think they were looking for those, and so they were eyeing us dark skinned brown folks for that role. So then they get us in groups of 10, and now I have to tell you, I don't know these other actors who are coming in with me in this audition room. The other 9 actors, they're strangers to me. I don't know them. And so first of all, they say, okay, we're gonna bring you in groups of 10. All right, everyone take off your shirts. We're like, whoa, wait, this is a Disney family film. So we take off our shirts, we go inside, and then they're like, okay, so they have a cameraman going through, and they say, okay, and they gave us the scene, and the scene was, I think, okay, you guys are cannibals. You don't want your cannibal king to leave, or your cannibal leader to leave, your tribe leader to leave. So you need to express that you don't want them to. And so then they went to each person, and then and so I was, and of course they didn't give us any instruction other than it's like, okay, well, you guys are cannibals, and it's like, well, and so I think we were directed, just use your whatever, just go say ooh ah ah. And I was like, that's the thing I ever, as an actor and as a trained actor, I was like, that's dumb. So I decided what I would do is use my Lao language, because I'm grounded in that. And I'm like, they're not gonna know. Yeah, they're not gonna know what I'm saying, but I'm gonna know what I'm saying. And so I used the Lao language, and in that process, I heard another guy in that group speaking Lao. So I was so excited about that, and I went over to him and I said, hey, and at that time I didn't know many Lao actors. I thought I was the only one. And so I went up to him and go, are you Thai? He goes, no, I'm Lao. I'm like, what? You're Lao? I'm Lao too. And I think when the director and the audition team saw that, there was a spark, and I think they were like, okay. And they called me, they called him, and they called one other person of the 10, and they asked us to do another scene. Out of that scene and out of that process, then they started to people. And I was not a cannibal, because I got a call back, and then they had made their choices. My friend Ledet Virvong, who's in the film actually of Lao Ghost Story, he's my brother. He's like my buddy. And so he became a cannibal, and then he became a pirate. Now, and then I was even more deflated, because I was like, man, I've been here in LA for 10, 15 years. My buddy here who just moved from Oklahoma has only been here for 5 years, and he's getting this role. What the heck? I'm pissed at myself. And then 3 weeks later, I get a call from casting. They go, they're thinking of you as an Asian pirate. I'm like, what does that mean? It was like, they're like, I don't know, just go to fitting. So then I go in, and then that's kind of how it all started. And here's the thing, in a big budget production like that, and I'm sure in even big budget films, the decisions oftentimes are last minute if you are in the lower rung of roles. And so in that respect, we were always basically put on call. Like, again, you don't want to, as an actor, and even as a background actor, you don't want to risk your opportunity, right? And so it's kind of like, okay, well, hold, the next half a year off for this project, but there's no contract, there's no role yet, because it's still being created. And I think part of the project was that from insider's perspective, in hindsight, it was because of the director, because Gore Verbinski, who's a wonderful director, by the way, he basically pushed the project forward. If it wasn't, because he was like, I want to start shooting, so let's just, whatever concept we have, let's start going. And then I believe the writers then were in a time crunch to try to craft the story as it went along. And so there was a lot of just in big productions like that, there was a lot of last minute situations. So that's kind of how I got onto Pirates. Now, when I was pinching myself the whole time, because my first scene was actually we were flown all the way to St. Vincent and the Grenadines over in the Caribbean on a black sand beach. Okay, and I'm like, first of all, I'm flying from LA to Puerto Rico because that was our stop, and then from Puerto Rico to St. Vincent. And I'm like, is this for real? I'm a background. What role is this for? And so we went all the way. When we got there, then was when they started to then put costumes on me, and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm playing here. This is how lack of information in a big production like this type. And so what happened was that costume department comes in and starts to, you know, look and start to fit me into different various things. And then I realized, okay, it's pirates. And so then in terms of getting into the role and learning the role, I think costume is a big factor because it's a visual medium form. I mean, film and TV, it's a visual storytelling. And so you may not need to know that's exactly what's going to happen. And so that helps to inform the character. The other aspect that I think was really wonderful in terms of the production was that because we are going to be on a boat, on a ship, on a pirate ship, we had to have at least a briefing and a lesson on, you got to know what the aft is. You got to know what the fore is. You got to know what the starboard and the, you know, and so you need to know these terms, because if you're going to act in this role as a pirate, you need to know that, or at least pretend that you know like what you're doing, because, and so I think the production, because they had the budget, they had training, they had people who come and trained you. Like I learned some, got some sirens there. So all right, so I learned to work a ship in the way that historically someone who had research and reference and knowledge of that taught us, like how to tie a line, you know, how do we make certain calls, you know, on a ship. You don't just call and say, hey, come over here. You know, there's certain, obviously, pirate language or language, what I call pirate language. But you got to understand that, right? I mean, if you're captain of your ship and you're a crew and you say these things and you don't understand it, then you're kind of not doing your part as an actor to research and learn the role. And so even for me, the role wasn't a big role, but it was an important role in terms. And so with that in mind, it was just a lot of education on my part, but also definitely the production when they could, because they knew they were going to have a group of folks who like may not know like the life of a pirate or even to be on a ship. Like one of the great stories I have is my first scene that I remember shooting, and it was still raw in the beginning of the shooting process. We went to in St. Vincent, we went to a black sand beach. They had dressed us up in our costumes and makeup. I had this port wine stain kind of scar on my face. The makeup person had created for me, and I had and so I went walking. They didn't give us any footwear. Okay, so we're walking on black sand beach, freaking hot as hell. We're like, you know, hopping like this, and we're like, I know pirates are gonna need footwear to protect their feet. I mean, and so those are the immediate kind of negotiable things that you kind of go, I'm suffering here as an actor, barefoot on a hot black sand beach, you know, walking over to, you know, Captain Sparrow over. And so but that was my first initial meeting actually with Johnny Depp and Jack Sparrow, because him and Jeffrey Rush were there as Captain Barbossa and Jack, and we were going to be part of the scene. So we go over there, and me and my crew of I think 5 at the time, no 6 Asian pirates, were all kind of walking over there. We didn't, you know, we had just flown in and they had just set us up. So we get there, and then one of my other actors, well, my fellow background actors, the makeup on him was really great. He had this huge like bulby thing growing right by his nose, like just this ugly bulb. And we got there, and Johnny Depp's there, and he's still in his, you know, Jack Sparrow, you know. And the first thing he comes and greets us is he looks at us and he goes, and he sees my friend with the bulb on his nose, and he goes, I know a good dermatologist for that. and that was just, you know, how it all started. And so that's kind of how, for me, I mean, as we went along in the production, I probably worked on the project maybe a span of maybe 30 days altogether in a 2-year period, because I think At the time, there was weather issues. There was a lot of on location shooting because it's a big budget film, and like we filmed out on a pirate ship in the ocean in the Caribbean. We also shot out in Redondo, South Bay here in California, way out in the ocean. We shot in, let me see, I went to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and then I also went to Bahamas. We shot there in the Bahamas as well. And then we also shot along the California coast as well. So, so yeah, we had to learn all these historical things by experts that they had hired for us in terms of pirates. And so, and it was interesting because as I'm learning more even about pirates myself, it's amazing how there's just so much education to have. There's different periods of pirates. I mean, Saopeng, Chow Yun-fat's character is a Chinese pirate and very different. And I think that's kind of the Keira Knightley character is also, influenced by the different regions of piracy. And so I think, and even what is it? You've got privateers who are under the flag of the British or other European nations at that time who, paid. I mean, you were paid to loot and like steal others and mess up other people's routes.
Yeah, short. Jeffrey Rush in the later series, was a paid privateer. Yeah. And especially focusing on your role of Lugo and Spartacus, how did you get that role?
Well, let me take you back a step first. I'm acting, writing, directing. As far as editing goes, I sit in a room with an editor. So my editing skills are limited to giving direction to somebody else. As for Lugo, how did I get that role? I went for Spartacus, Blood and Sand, but they said I was too old. And you'd rightly know that most of the gladiators back in the day, they were considered too old in their mid-20s, if they're lucky to get to 30, if they were lucky. So I thought that show was perfect for me, and I kept begging my agent to get me an audition. And when it went to season 2 and they broke out of the Ludus, that was when it was open slather. You could be any age; it didn't make any difference. So I got the audition, and it was then I found out the audition for Lugo went Australia, America, England. It was global, and I thought, well, I've got no chance. And Steve Knight picked me, so Steve Knight, I will always be eternally grateful. But yeah, that was pretty much how I got Lugo, and I just went into him playing just. Had to go into him playing that guy with a sense of someone who was never going to go home.
So Ova, and you did mention sort of the industry and different parts of Hollywood and the filmmaking process, and I know you do writing and producing as well. And so, when it comes to something like we'll center on like a historical film, you have sort of all these different departments with, I guess, their own budgets and their own, I guess, end goals and things like that. Can you talk a little, I guess, what is sort of, you don't have to do every department, but, in making a film, what is their, what are they trying to do? And do they often work well with each other, or, is there often conflict between these different departments to get this finished product?
All of it, yes. All of it, yes. Everything you just said, yes. Yes, there are conflicts in different departments. I think overall it is, the director will have the final, and then the producer will have the final in terms of whatever decisions are made. I think what helps is that the vision of the director or the vision of the producer is kind of given to all these departments. And so it's kind of like a big concept, right? It's like, okay, I'm the big concept person. Here's my concept. Here's what I want to see. Okay. And now as these department heads, then they take that, and then usually what they'll do is they'll then go out and research and start to explore, kind of bouncing off from what the concept is. Okay. And then they would bring it back, and then it's yes or no. It's like, oh yeah, you're going in the right direction. Oh no, that's totally not what I was thinking of. And then that's where I think the battles come in terms of, like if you are specifically an expert in this, like for example, costumes. If you're an expert in costume design, obviously, you can go, okay, well, that's a certain time period that we definitely need to have this. Director says, okay, well, I got the budget for it, but here's how much I have for it. Can you work with that? And so that's where then the compromises and the adaptations of Like, okay, I got to use modern material, but I know that I can't, so it's the time frame and the funding to make that happen, and how creative you. And I think similarly, I think, like, for example, with a lot of special effects, right? Special effects, I mean, there's some really genius special effects artists who know how to create things that on film would totally look like whatever it is, that like gushing blood out of my ear or something, whatever that. But they have because they've been around it and they know how filming it works. They have a shortcut. They know how to. Okay, well, let's go use I don't know, beet juice, and and so it's that kind of thing that's where the innovation and the experts in their departments really are good at. And yes, there's going to be conflict. There is going to be like, okay, I have this vision, it's not working out. I have this vision. Oh, costume is working with stunt, because hey, if you're a stunt person and you're putting on all these costumes, you're going to need to be able to move, right? And like I'll give you an example. So for my costume, I actually had the costume wise, I was fine. But what happened was that they were giving us for props, in the props department, they were giving us these weapons. Okay, some of the weapons heavy, like metal, and so it's like, well, I mean, I love being an actor, but I mean, having this real thing that's heavy and being there all day standing, or it doesn't help me. And so then they would have to get a replica that would be lighter, or plastic that would look like it, so that then you can then work better in that way, in terms of, because it's just a prop, it's just visually, as long as it looks like what it looks like, it doesn't have to be authentic or real. But obviously the concept and the weapons expert would know, okay, that's definitely a weapon that within that time frame would not exist or would exist. So those are some of the interesting aspects of various different departments and their expertise. What's interesting for me is that as an Asian pirate, it was interesting, all our different costumes, and they are obviously, again, story-wise, you want each character unique and different, right? How do you do that, knowing that there's only so much in terms of a makeup or even a costume person to differentiate these characters, so that obviously Asian pirates, I mean, there's all different kinds. And so again, they would probably have to compromise and kind of loosely, like, okay, well, my friend's wearing an African hat. Why is he wearing an African hat? Well, I mean, the story wise is that, I mean, pirates are everywhere. I mean, they sure collect loot. And so they put various different things on. I mean, I look like, we joked for me, because I was like the Mexican looking Asian pirate was my costume, because I totally had like a vest, like a Cheech Marin poncho vest, that was, and that sucker was heavy because it was made of real leather. And so like when we did scenes where we were wet, like I had to die, like when we were walking through water, oh my gosh, it weighed me down. I was like, man, this is dangerous, and so those are the things that, again, informing, costume department, informing props, informing all these departments, and they need to know. I mean, like first day, like I said, no footwear. I mean, excuse me, we're gonna be walking on a pirate ship, like on a deck that's like been burning hot. It's like walking on asphalt. We're just gonna burn our feet, and so we so they then costume department probably had to figure out, okay, well, let's get them some footwear. What kind of footwear is going to be seen on camera? If it's not, then maybe they can cheat. If it isn't, then they definitely have to get, some type of footwear that would be apropos to that time period. So those are the kind of concessions, I guess, that I think of that these various different departments would have to deal with.
And so it sounds like the directors and producers have the complete final say. So even if the props department and the costuming department are like, well, this is 100%, historically accurate, the director and producer can still say, well, it's messing with my storytelling, or it's messing with, the audience might not recognize this and not understand it.
Yeah.
Go back. Go back.
Yeah. So there's that's, as we talk about this, at which point does authenticity then get skewed, right? And that's kind of, or not skewed, but kind of just we have artistic license to kind of play with authenticity. And I think the hardest part, I think, is that it basically, as whatever department head you are, or as that department, you say, look, here's the option, and here's the period of time where we're looking at. Here are the options I can give you as a director, right? If you're the director, to say, hey, you this is the vision you had. Here's the authentic kind of like research that I've had on it. Does this work? You know, and if it doesn't, it's not in your vision, it doesn't work, then it's a question of, well, do you want to argue for that authenticity, or do you say, okay, we're gonna have to, compromise and say, okay, well, this is kind of bleeding into this kind of time period, so it's possible that we could use this. So, I mean, it is a lot of negotiating and a lot of going back and forth. And again, but the ultimate decision power is usually producer and director, because they're the ones who are kind of envisioning it. And then, of course, the head of the departments will then maybe go head to head with kind of like what decisions, need to be made for that to happen. So definitely there is a balance of, how much, authenticity and how much, and similarly, I think that's part of the challenge right now in terms of the industry and in terms of creating work. Because, like, for example, I don't want to be reliant on just playing a Lao American role, because there aren't that many Lao American roles, and so I want to be able to play other roles, right? And so that's kind of where, as an actor, and then putting it into the challenges that we face in terms of equity and diversity and inclusion and representation, right? I think as long as a production comes in with an intentionality of being as authentic as possible, because obviously especially if you're not from that either culture or that region or that time period, obviously you do your best research, and then from there you got to then look at, because it narrows down in terms of what is available to you at that time from either this community or this time period or this space that you're in. Like, I mean, if you shoot in LA, it's gonna be different from shooting in, say, in Boston, because of what is available around there, right? And so that's the kind of thing that I think is hard. Those are the compromises.
Going back to Lugo, or just even talking about the job of an actor. So if you can kind of explain it to the layman or to our audience, what is your job as an actor? What is it that you are pretty much supposed to do or hired to do?
Yeah, I'm hired to be a liar, but I've got to convince you that it's the truth. That's it for me as an actor. If I can go in and I can convince you of the lie and have you believe that I'm telling you the truth, I've done my job. I need to be on that set and deliver an emotional performance that is believable.
And for Lugo, what did the studio really provide you with for the character, and then what did you have to sort of come up with to flesh out this believable character? I guess flesh out the lie so that we believe it.
We got a brief, and for these characters, it was just a brief. I mean, my character originally was for 4 episodes, and I eventually played 14. You get a brief on where he's come from, and pretty much that's about it. And then I had to come up with and all actors do this, is come up with a credible backstory for your character so that you know where you. And mine was a guy that had been captured. He was manic. He'd been captured while he was out on a raiding party. He had his own family, he had his own son, so that was his attachment to Nasir. And he knew that he would never be going home again. So his one goal was to take as many Romans with him to the afterlife.
I guess talking about that on the writing side, you finished the script a few years ago for Viking Wars. Can you tell us a little bit about that process of writing a historical script and what goes into it?
Viking Wars was an interesting one. It came to me as a brief, so it's not something that I had to create from the ground up. And my producer, Bridget, did most of the groundwork for this. I had to build characters. I had to build the world. But there was a huge amount of information came in from her. And we researched all of the weapons for the time period to make sure that they were in the right place, they were correct. So, if like we had the giant catapult, and I'm never going to try. We wanted to make sure that they were in use. So we were at Siege of Paris, where they're being used by the Viking. Or the swords that they used, whether they used bow and arrows, anything and everything to make it as historically correct as we could. Because what we didn't want was somebody being able to watch this and then get pulled out of that world because they go, well, that wasn't there. But you try to stay within that as much as you possibly can.
Right. And I think that's sort of the core thought of this episode, is that when living historians or reenactors see history movies, whether it's like Gladiator or Braveheart, Kingdom of Heaven, there's always that element of, well, that's not the way it's supposed to be, or that never happened, or that's not an accurate costume or armor. And I think with Hollywood, it's really a big juggling act. And so the fact that a writer like you is doing their homework, I guess, is an interesting step. So what's the next stop, I think, for the script?
Well, like I said, I wrote it for somebody else. I'm not a producer, nor am I a director. I'm simply the writer, and the writer is the bottom rung of the ladder. I asked them a while back if I could do the writing sample and petition, which I did. I put it into final drafts, big break, and quarterfinal with it in it was last year. So it was a bumper year for entries for them, massive amounts of scripts. So it was quite an accomplishment for it. As far as where it goes now, I have no idea. It's in the lap of the producer.
Well, hopefully, yeah, they greenlight it and they stick with the historical accuracy aspect of it.
It's always the goal.
Yeah, and calling on producers, if you need Viking reenactors, we know people to fill in the role.
Yeah, I'll have my people call your people. We'll do lunch.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess real quick, you brought up the weapons, and I know you had this massive hammer. How heavy was that thing, or what was it made out of?
There were 3 different styles. There was a resin, which was really heavy, and then it went down to a foam version. It was like a marshmallow. The marshmallow one, everybody was, oh, hit me with it. Let's just hit me so I can put it on film. And we'd have the Phantom going. You'd hit them and you wouldn't see their head shake. You'd see the hammer go like a pillow.
Do you have any of those hammers? Or
no, not anymore. No, I put one up for auction ages ago. I think we did it for a charity thing. And in fact, I don't have anything left from Spartacus other than I have a leather-bound script that a friend of mine bound in leather and sent to me. And I'll tell you what, I do have one from set for you. And because I think you're aware, my Labrador Alfie, who was on set with me consistently or constantly while we were shooting this, that Alfie died not long ago. And I have a story of Alfie from set, if you want.
Yes, absolutely. We love dog stories.
So I'd take him to work with me, and while we were in between shooting our scenes, we'd be doing stunt rehearsals. So we were pretty much every single day on set. If we weren't shooting, we'd be doing rehearsals. So one day I take in Alfie, and I've got him, well, every day, but I've got him in this particular day, and he's up on a rampart, and I've got him in the down. So, and this is bear in mind that this is a dog that was a breeder for the Guide Dog Association. So Alf is as gentle natured as you're going to get. So we're doing stunt rehearsals. And during stunt rehearsals, things would go we'll go 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, and then it's full on. So everything would work up slowly through stunt rehearsals, so no one was going to get injured until we were at a stage where we were competent enough to be able to do 100%. So Alf's up on his rampart, and he's very quietly watching everything. 20%, 40%, 60%, no problem at all. 80%, we're ready to go. At 100%, these guys come charging into you, and swords and flashing steel going everywhere. These guys come charging in at 100%, and they opened their mouths and they went, and my dog stood up and went, and everybody froze. He was just standing over his dad going, back off. I think they still remember to this day, these guys were going, hey man, can you get your dog on? Never thought I'd hear those words about that dog from anybody.
Ari Ryan, who's a fan of the show, he's been on before. His daughter's like obsessed with Orlando Bloom. Do you have any Orlando Bloom stories before we go?
Orlando, let me think. Well, I mean, just recently, actually, there was a beautiful picture of me and my guys, the Asian pirate guys that we get to hang out with. We were in Palmdale, and we were shooting with Orlando on a huge big pirate ship that was on a gimbal. So a gimbal is this mechanism that actually, and this is amazing. This is how, if you get the budget, man, you can do so many things. But they built a ship that's on a gimbal, and then they could rock it and basically what's the word? Pretend that we're on a ship. But there were these blue balls that were falling down. They were all falling down on us because there was being that scene in Pirates 3 where all the crabs, where Calypso, she grows into that 30-foot woman, and then it kind of like then she blows up, and then she becomes all these crabs. And so that was a scene where we had a lot of fun with Orlando there as well. having all these blue balls falling on all of them. So that's my Orlando Bloom. Yeah.
And promotion. Was there anything you wanted to plug on the podcast?
I mean, our theatrical show, Masters of the Currents, will be coming up. I don't know when the podcast is coming out, but if it comes out before October and November, then October 21st, we will be doing the show at USC. And then in November, we will be in Utah, in Salt Lake City. So look up Masters of the Currents and TeAda Productions. And then obviously the short films that I've been working on, Warsol, please keep an eye out for that. And that's about it that I can kind of plug right now. But you know, things are always in the works, and I think that's just been the wonderful thing. So thank you for having me on your podcast and having this great discussion.
I'll tell you what I am up to. That it's got some historical value. I've been doing a documentary on an old motorcycle racer here. So it's been taking up a lot of my time. I'm just doing the final edit on it. If we hadn't been locked down, I probably would have been finished it by now. I've got one more day of pickups to do, so pickup shots out of the racetrack called Hampton Downs, and then another day in the edit suite to finish the rough cut, and then it goes off to see whether we've got any interest with buyers. But fantastic story. Really old motorcycle racer back in the 50s and 60s. His wife made him promise not to go to Europe because she's seen him dying on a track there every time she shut her eyes and she went to sleep. She had these dreams he was going to die on a track in Europe, so she made him promise not to go. And he had these two young children, so he swore he wouldn't go. And then she died really young, and his kids split. So he had all the things that he promised not to go for. He had lost. So he bought himself another bike out of the UK, and he'd still been racing here in New Zealand and Australia. And he decided to give it another go in his late 40s, and he was going down the back of a track, one of the bigger tracks here in New Zealand, 120 mile an hour, and a bike blew up underneath him and sent him down head first down the track, gave him brain damage, and he could never race again. So there's this really bittersweet Greek tragedy. But he was this guy that was, if the guys who were going to Europe and they were coming back as first, second, or third in the world, he was matching or beating them on a track. So he knew that if he'd gone to Europe, he could have been a world champion. So yeah, I'm just finishing up on that right.
That's it for our show today. Thanks to all of our guests and thanks to everyone listening. This is Deconstructing History.